Yo, it's Marcus Scraper, and Tesla stock had a beating today. We went down over 3.4%, but intraday we went down even further. We saw prices as low as $691.85. Is this the end of the Tesla beating? Was the news today justified for why we went down this far? And is this what we expect to see with Tesla stock? Was this the price action we expected? Well, let's get into that right now. But before we get into this video, if you get any value from this content, don't forget to smash down on that like button. It really helps this content, helps other people see this video. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to this channel. It's free to do, and I'd really appreciate it. Okay, so Tesla stock, as we can see over here, we expected actually in our video that we made on the 14th, when we had this down day, after we hit our price target over here of $780, we made the claim that this gap over here was a gap that we expected to be filled, and we expected it to be filled in a couple days. So it actually ended up being filled in 3 days. So pretty close there. And basically, the news that we had today, the media has been pretty biased about why there was a Tesla crash and kind of pointing the finger at Tesla in a lot of cases. This has been way blown out of proportion. If any driver from any car was in the back seat, for example, this is just reckless driving. This should not be, in my opinion, pointed at Tesla in any way. So this is an interesting development that's happening. This is also why we're seeing price action recover a lot throughout the day as well. This is an overblown situation. However, the price action is not too surprising in my opinion. I expected us to go to this gap fill, and this was a reason for the stock on a technical level to sell off, whether it was algorithms, whatever is happening. It is a sell-off that was not too crazily went to the gap fill over here. We went a little bit lower, of course, and it could have been a pretty interesting level down here. But basically, in our last update over here, we talked about this idea that we would go to this gap fill, but more importantly, basically go down to this level of consolidation over here, which happens to coincide with this gap fill in addition. And so we definitely did that today. So because this news was overblown, would I kind of expect a recovery, which we already seen in the stock price. We could see a continued recovery as well once we see the FUD from this news, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, kind of blow off a little bit and investors jump back into this stock. So that's kind of what I'm expecting. But pay attention to this broader triangle pattern that we are seeing here, this ascending triangle, and we wouldn't be surprised to see price eventually go down to this level like we talked about in our last video. So if you missed that video, definitely take a look at my previous video. I'll link it right over here, and you can see basically this ascending triangle pattern, which I talked about ever since my first episode of this series, which was right around here. This was, I think, was April 3rd, was when I made the video actually, and I talked about where I saw price going the next day, and I thought we'd break above this trend line here, which we did as well. So take a look at that video. But in the meantime, I wouldn't be surprised for Tesla to have another run to the upside because we do have earnings coming next week. That wouldn't be so surprising. Well, let's take a look at the broader market here. On the S&P 500, we have some interesting things going on here. We have this pattern going on here, this bull flag that broke out to the upside, and we have this massive breakout of this long-term trend line here. But we talked about that we wouldn't be surprised to see a pullback to this level over here. So expect a potential pullback there. We'll be watching this level very closely if we can stay above it, or if we end up breaking down below it like we did historically in a couple cases. So we have to be paying attention to that. I'm having lots of trouble here, but basically these areas over here we failed to break out. So the question is this time different? And again, I think that this time is different. Let's take a look at Palantir stock now. Palantir stock right over here. We talked about in our last video that this was more bearish, and I turned more bearish on this stock for the short term. And this is not too surprising because we broke our trend right over here, right? So we broke this trend and we are continuing to see lower lows. And I talked about that I would be an interested buyer once we hit down here. if we hit down here. It doesn't mean we have to hit down there. We could have a recovery before then. Price is looking a little bit interesting. And especially as someone noted rightfully in my last video, is that there is an interesting gap fill right over here that price is going to. And so I've been paying attention to that gap fill and we filled that gap today. So that was pretty interesting. And maybe that was where we're trying to go to. Whether we're trying to go to the bottom of this trend or whether we were trying to just simply fill this gap fill down here. So that's something that I'll be paying attention to and watching. And so we could see a reversal in the near future, possibly. But it also at the same time wouldn't be surprising to get back to this level here before we see a reversal to potentially the upside. Well, I hope you guys got some value from this content. If you haven't already, smash that like button, subscribe to this channel for more content like this, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. And keep in mind that none of this is financial advice. This is just some random guy on YouTube drawing some stick figure lines on a chart talking to you guys.